Hello and welcome to another Webster report on this, the 3rd of August 2025. We're in the 8th month of 2025 already. And I know that Russ has got some stuff to bring in because of what he's been researching for a lot to talk about this week. But we seem to say this every week, don't we, Alex, that there's a lot to talk about this week. We've had Trump come over here. I know because you've been incommunicado, you might not be up to date with some stuff, but Trump came over, visited Scotland, pissed all over the mayor of London and said that he was a horrible man. And Keir Starmer wimpishly said, but he's my friend. You know, we've got all this play acting that's going on. Taylor will tell us where we're up to in that script. What's your opinion on these things?
Well, it's business as usual, and yes, I suppose on some levels I've been in the cave, but I've noticed a few of these things, and I suppose it depends again, it's a paradigm, isn't it? It's like, from what vantage point do you approach these things? So I basically really got heavily into the truth movement in an established sense in 2013, back end, beginning of 2014. So probably around 11 and a half years now. And at the time, I remember encountering a community of people who were coming together, they were galvanizing each other, they were recognizing the state of the world. People were, watching David Icke, all those people who were bringing awareness of what was actually going on in the world. And I think, obviously, it's very useful because if you don't know, you could be deceived. And a lot of the people regarding the vaccine were deceived. So if you don't have your own internal compass well tuned in, we rely on these communities to bring a basic level of awareness about what's going on in the world, because you can't possibly follow everything, know everything. And some people who are really decent, they take their eye off the ball. They're absorbed with the issues of everyday life. So when you change, though, because we're talking, 11 and a half years in for me now, and I came back to a faith perspective. You evaluate it and you think, well, focusing on this is a problem. Awareness of this is not a problem. Focus upon this is a problem, because you're giving your energy to the very thing that you've identified. So for me, I just see it as business as usual. I just see that there's a Punch and Judy show going on some levels, and it's very hard to. I mean, obviously, the view is now that Keir is not going to see out the year. However, it looks as if he might be replaced by somebody else in the Labour Party. The thing about that is, realistically, because of what's happened, they should actually call a general election, because it's a vote of no confidence in the government. His cabinet have been supporting his policies openly. They've been implementing policies across the board which are harming this country financially and culturally and in every other way. So it's difficult not to see a vote of no confidence come in. But we can't really say, will Labour try and head that off and replace Starmer beforehand? Because obviously the likes of Farage would really like to. They'd rather not wait till 2029 to get into power, and how much more damage will be done in the next 4 years. So there's a lot of things that on a bigger scale, the tectonic plate movements we spoke about last week, it's not clear. Like, this tsunami that we saw could have had this big earthquake in Russia. It's a good metaphor for what's happening geopolitically and in the UK. So it's hard to say as yet which way it's going to go. It just looks like more of the same. And at some point, something's going to have to give. And it's not clear where the fault lines will crack open. Will it be a general election called within the next few months, or will Labour try and replace Keir so they can stay in power and see the full turn for him?
Well, for me, I'll see if I can share this. I think there's a stirring within the cabinet. They know that they're in trouble. They've got to do something, but are people going to fall for it like they always they always have. Do you know what I mean? Is there something different? Do the people believe that there's something different? Because these immigration protests that are on now, we've got evidence that the police were bringing in anti-protesters. So the protesters that were pro Hamas or pro-Palestinian or whatever, and Antifa, the police were bringing in. This isn't like a conspiracy theory. There's no theory in this. We've seen the evidence of the buses with people getting on the bus there and then people getting back on those buses and taken away. What you just said about Starmer being replaced so they can hang on. Well, you've got Angela Rayner who's behind here now. Katie Hopkins has weighed in on this, so this is a couple of minutes. But see what you think of this, Alex.
Breaking news from a wonky world of Cop One balls, because quite honestly, there's so much refused to acknowledge what's happening here in the UK and what's being done to you. I would say this, if you carry on like this with your head in the sand, it's always going to be so much easier, isn't it, for the government to take you right up the...
Angela Rayner, Labour's fiery deputy leader and current housing minister, is used to being the one dishing out political blows, not the one taking them. But this time, the tables have turned, and the voice leading the charge against her isn't a quiet critic in the Commons, it's Katie Hopkins. And whether you love or loathe her, there's no denying she's hit a nerve. This story isn't about petty politics, it's about the trust of the British public, and whether one of the highest-ranking officials in Labour can still be trusted to lead after what's come to light. Before we continue, I'd like to ask for a quick favor. If you're enjoying this content, could you take a moment to like this video and triggered it all? Hopkins didn't hold back, and frankly, she didn't need to. From her opening words, she made it clear, this isn't about political etiquette or civil discourse. This is about calling out what she sees as betrayal. Betrayal of voters, betrayal of the truth, betrayal of the working class people that Labour claims to stand for. At the heart of this controversy is a single house and a serious question. Did Angela Rayner lie about where she was living when she bought a discounted council home under the Right to Buy scheme? Because if the accusations are true, this isn't just a bad look, it could be a criminal offense. According to electoral records, while Rayner was registered at the property in question, her husband and children were registered at another address entirely. And that, under UK electoral law, raises red flags. You're legally required to register at your actual permanent home.
The price of the whole summer, when you don't need your heating on, they put the price down. The minute it's been freezing and we're about to go into properly Baltic, they shove the price up by 10%. And my question is, where are elderly people supposed to get an extra 150 quid? Or 1,500, or 2,000, or whatever their extra bill is, right? £300. Where are they supposed to rustle that?
If you knowingly...
So that's a little bit all over the place, that. But basically, they're saying that she's done all these dealings that she's got kickbacks from that other people would be in a lot of trouble for. So if she's then in charge of our management because we've employed her. Who is she working for? Because we know Starmer's not working for us. So we've got to see whoever we replace, the manifesto is still there. The manifesto is still going to come out. And they're still going to keep playing this same tune. Katie Hopkins is banging on about this fuel allowance thing. Again, is she ignorant or is she playing the game, Alex, that under those bills of exchange, those old people shouldn't be entitled to those winter fuel allowances because they shouldn't be paying those bills? There's a truth here that everybody seems to be missing. And we get that with the Bible as well. Everybody's got the Bible. Everybody says they believe it. We've got all these people who say they're Christians but don't act like what it says in the Bible. So we've got all these mishaps that are going on. And you've got either people who are actively joining in the grooming or they're genuinely ignorant and they're trying to help. But the thing is, they're still keeping people in that bondage because they're not explaining everything. This is about getting all the information. You mentioned the information early doors. Everybody's got to have access to all the information, the most corrupt and the best, and everything in between. With the new online act that's kicked in this week, it's meant to be directed for children not to get onto things, but you can't comment about immigration. You can't do these things because it's this, it's that. They're looking to bring in blasphemy laws. Are we seeing things actually start to change here, Alex?
No, I don't think so. I think the problem with Katie Hopkins is all forms of populism play into the voyeurism of the mass media, regardless of which side you're on. What happened with the liberals, the lefties, when they're in that extreme position, when they're in power, is they basically weaponized speech. They still try to do it from a position of relative powerlessness because Trump got in and he started to undermine that. That's why he's sort of challenging Starmer from across the pond from us. So it's still hard for him. But the problem is always the same one about defining the narrative. And because truth, what is truth? Well, this is what Pilate said. But what's ultimate truth when it comes to facts? When you've got the media able to spin, you remember politics when spin doctors first appeared. Spin, gloss, putting a face on something. So what happened was the Liberals started off this position where they didn't actually use logic in arguments. They weren't interested in facts. They were interested in winning and shutting down the opposition, and they had the power to do so. So the problem now is it's quite addictive, that. So people are trying to put these truth bombs in based on cosmetic stuff, reports, things that got said, these facts. I mean, the only surprise, right, about politicians who are corrupt is that people are surprised. You know, I remember when MP's expenses first came out, I'm thinking, well, why are you surprised? Everyone who has these situations leverages to their own advantage. I mean, think about it in simple terms, in terms of Premier League footballer contracts. I think Jared Branthwaite at Everton's on £110,000 a week. If he gets a 4-year contract, that's 5.2. What is it? Like 5.2 million a year. So you're talking, that's 20 million over 4 years. Government will take half of it off him. He knows he can get £10 million. He gets that contract, and if after 6 months he's playing rubbish, he can just set in his contract. And after 4 years, even if he plays no real football, his reputation is damaged. He's walked away with 10 million quid. He's made for life. We've got a culture now which rewards people who don't actually do anything. And celebrity is one of those things. So all you need to do is propel yourself into the limelight, and you can make hay while the sun shines. And what that means is people are essentially corruptible. Most people are corruptible, especially when it's an every man, woman, and child for the self sort of culture, because people go, well, look, I can't afford to think too much about my neighbour. There's some really bad stuff going on in the world. But I tell you what, I'll just look after number one. So we've got a looking after number one culture. That means that people don't really care too much about truth as an objective position. They care about being okay. And so you've got a bunch of people trying to milk this populistically and otherwise. Even if they're on the side of the right, they are attempting to do cosmetic work, and all of that is superficial and shallow. And this is where we come back to what you mentioned in terms of scripture. You know, the Bible is described, Jesus talks in Matthew 7 about the wise and foolish builders who built their house upon a rock or upon sand. And when the storms and the gales and the floods come, the one that's built on sand will get washed away, and the ones that are built on rock will survive. And of course, the point about that is you only find out when those testing conditions come whether you've got a building that's fit for purpose. So for me, it's a house of cards in the rain, and it's going to come down one way or the other, mate. So ultimately, it's not a question of what's going on or not going on, or how somebody can put a spin on it, or how somebody can use clever rhetoric. Regardless of the truth, they're two separate issues. The question is, whose side are you on? what's your commitment to truth? How do you discern truth? And how do you lay good foundations? And beyond that, most of it is just a Punch and Judy show.
But everybody's just in the Punch and Judy show trying to lay those foundations in a Punch and Judy show that isn't survivable. So when we've got Katie Hopkins going up against Angela Rayner, we're watching two of the puppets of the same show going at each other, and that was my point. Everybody would jump if these celebrities came out and said, "Look at this bills of exchange thing. Look at what we've been doing all this time." You would see that influence. You would see that shift. That's why you've got these people who are bickering and arguing over, I think the man on the left is to my liking, or the woman on to my right is my liking. I think they say the best things. I have a mate who wouldn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn, and I said, "Why? Is it because he supports Palestine, or you think he's a Hamas supporter, or what? What's your point?" He went, "He doesn't wear a suit." I went, "What do you mean he doesn't wear a suit? He doesn't look like a politician, so I'd never vote for him." So it didn't matter what his policies were, because he just wouldn't vote for him because of that. That was exactly what I grew up with. I vote for Labour because my dad did. Well, Labour's sold us out. You've got to be on a different planet to not understand that Labour's sold us out. But the Conservatives who were saying, "Oh, look at what they've done," they did the same thing because they both worked together. The Lib Dems who broke through because people had had enough, they coerced themselves into being that power that extended the agenda, because that's all we've got. You know, with these elections, when you vote, when you are on this electoral roll, you are taking part, but you're participating in a system that isn't designed for you to win at. So how do we deal with that? Well, if you look at what they're doing now, for me, they are fanning the flames of civil unrest. And it's down to the people now to keep that common sense. But when you can see public services allegedly bussing other protesters in that are agitators, that all of a sudden they have riots in these places, it's no different to the BLM stuff. And we talked about destruction capitalism. Well, people start rioting in their own areas, set fire to things, break things, and then people have to come in and fix them. And who pays for that? The general public. Well, the gas bill's going up as well. Who's going to pay for that? Well, they've got to pay for that as well. You can't keep taking and taking and taking, and the only direction that people seem to be being pushed to is civil unrest. And you've even got Nigel Farage, who's already been checked for his speech because Farage said he can understand why people are upset. So they've took that as that he's encouraging rioting. This is the stupidity and the play on the words. But I'll tell you what, Alex, if you can't see the rhetoric and the stupidity from all of the parties that are involved here, and you can't join it with what's happening in America, then I don't understand whether you can ever say that you've ever known any politics.
Well, I think here, mate, truth-telling and discernment are central. They go hand in hand. But I'll give you an example of the kind of thing that need to happen, right? You know, from my perspective, we need to get honest, right? So the point is, honesty and truth-telling is very costly for most people. We have got used to censoring ourselves in our own truthful perspective. To compromise, you know, you've got a family life, for example. Mind your P's and Q's, things you don't say to not upset the apple cart. We've got to cut through all that stuff. So, for example, politically, once people start talking about what's going on in Israel and Palestine, you're in this country, you just tell them to shut up. Just say, shut up. Because what they'll do, you can see it with truthers all the time. People are just taking sides on whether it's Israel or whether it's Palestine. And most people are pro-Palestinian. And then they get into these protracted debates about what Israel is, how long Israel's been there. They don't know anything about the history. They get confused about the difference between land rights, historical occupation, divine claims and promises that were made, ethnic Jews, you know, so Sephardic Jews versus Ashkenazi Jews and all this malarkey. And they just end up chasing the tail. And then they bring all this stuff out and rhetoric because somebody talked about Palestine. A few people are protesting in this country about Palestine and Israel, human rights abuses. It's like, what are you talking about? You just got to shut them down. So we're not interested in human rights abuses in places where we don't live, because we live here. So you just shut them down. Say, no, I don't want to talk about that. What's going on in this country? So stop using smoke and mirrors to distract people and talk about things that are going on thousands of miles away. It's got nothing to do with us. We're not interested in getting involved. Yes, we might have a private opinion, but when you politically parade that over the news all the time, and you have news headlines bringing attention to it, same with Ukraine, Russia, and everyone's there watching it like a soap opera. It's voyeuristic, and then everyone's taking a moral side. They're aligning themselves with a particular side and then getting moral capital about how virtuous they are because they've taken a side, which we call virtue signaling, and it's alive and well. So what we need to do is shut people down and tell truth, which is basically what's going on in this country. So I would just basically shut that Starman down all the time if I was a reporter and say, why do you keep focusing on these international matters, Keir, when things are so grave at home? And unless people really hold his feet to the fire, then they'll just continue with the script, and it needs courageous truth tellers to call it all out for what it is, which is BS.
Well, we're seeing American lawyers get involved now because there's at least 4 big American companies that Ofcom starting to have hassle with over these identity things on this bill for freedom of speech reasons. Now, Keir Starmer, you said you saw him again in Scotland. Oh, we've always had free speech in England and we always will have. The amount of people that are getting sent down, Alex, for naughty tweets because they're explaining things that are factually going on because it's being used for this or that. Now, the online bill actually stipulates it's talking about anything that's anti-immigration. Now, that's not aimed at kids because kids don't normally talk about things like that. But it's stopping people. I was talking to somebody the other day. All the pubs have gone. All the churches have gone. Very few community centres are left. So we're not seeing communities come together to speak about anything. And they're being fed absolute bullshit on all the mainstream channels that are all mixing it with the same puppets. We've got Hamas now who've graciously said that the Red Cross can bring in supplies into Gaza, and it's because Bibi put pressure on them. You know, after all this time, they decided this. So, you know, we from Taylor's point of view, Bibi's not Bibi. So this is how deep and dark and filthy this place gets, because if there's an ounce of truth, which there probably is in everything, but if there's an ounce of truth in these people don't exist and that Donald Trump is against this new world order, we can see the 2 phoenixes are rising and one's going to devour the other. So which eagle turns? Which eagle devours the other here? You know, we've seen we've seen that Trump's come from where he was in so much debt that he's had Jewish investment in. They love him over there. He's their Messiah. He's changed he's put everything to Jerusalem, which means Jerusalem is the capital again. It's virtually the capital. Everybody knows it's Jerusalem. So this is all building up to what we always see as Armageddon and this final curtain that's coming. So we are seeing a play, but how dirtier does it get? Because, you know, when we're talking about the things we've just spoken about there's so much involved. And you can hear the people now, Alex, saying, oh, that can't be true because there's too many people involved. You pay your bills. It doesn't take a lot. It just takes a bit of grooming and a bit generational through the families. Get the kids groomed as well. So 6 to 11-year-olds think that anal sex and masturbation is the thing to be thinking about. This is all part of grooming in a society that's fallen. And we see that when we go into these societies that have fallen like this, where all of the commands of God that would help keep everything flourish, you see that it's tipped over the edge. And, you know, it's up to individuals now whether you can come back from that edge or not. You know, there's no big thing here, but there's so many people, Al, that are travelling along in the car on a really nice little declining gradient that's not causing them too much issues, but they're still, still Christian because they go to a church on a Sunday and they especially attend on Easter and Christmas. If that's all you're doing, I think you might be missing something. I'm still studying. Maybe I'm not correct on it, mate. But believing that before anything kicks off that will be taken out of here, when Jesus himself says immediately after those times, I'll come back, that means there's got to be something extra scriptural that we're missing. And that's when you start going into, well, it's God's mystery and this, that. Well, we start going into the realms of fantasy then, and there's nothing like a good brain sick fantasy of a man, is there?
No, I think as well, mate, that really it's fashionable to talk nowadays about living in a post-truth world, and it's not actually correct. We don't live in a post-truth world, but in reality, what's happened is truth has been relativized through a bunch of social forces that have developed over really the last century or so. And this means it's very difficult for people to assert truth claims because there's that many loud voices saying this is the truth because I said so. Now, for me, this is a big problem for Christianity as well, for the faith. And I was actually checking, and I know Russ at some point will be coming in with some theological and biblical stuff, but I'll just open something up actually at this point because I think it's relevant. We all know that Isaiah 53 is prefiguring the situation that's going to develop when ultimately Jesus fulfills that as a suffering servant. But there's a lot of talking now. I've not got the scripture time. I've got a Bible over yonder, but it says, that he was bruised for our iniquities. By his stripes we are healed. And actually, it's scourging. Now, Jesus' scourging is whipping. Now, all the stuff around bruising and healing is about human pain. The scourging, and it's spoken about before our iniquities being taken away by sacrifice. So there's two aspects to that. There is the fact that Jesus clearly, as the suffering servant, his sacrifice clears the decks with our sin. The church has unfortunately tended to run exclusively with that interpretation and has got into juridical, which is basically legal-based theories of atonement, where it's all about our sin and it's all just cleansed by sacrifice. But Isaiah 53 doesn't start there. And even mention of the scourging, the whipping, in his humanity, his whole humanity, he bore our pain. He took on board all that stuff in his life and ministry, even before he died. The cross isn't just some functional magic wand solution that God gave. God came, incarnated human flesh, lived a human life, bore through compassion a lot of our pain, healed many people who were in pain and sickness in the life that they were living. So healing is important. And when you leave that bit out, for example, in the New Testament in particular, you were looking at people having, leprosy is a fairly standard thing, and blindness, and there's physical illnesses, but there was epilepsy, and epilepsy was often connoted with demon possession. But you didn't have any discussion of mental health problems or trauma and so on and so forth. So the modern world is considerably different in its presentation of the human being and the pain, sadness, heartache, So it opens up in Isaiah 53 that he was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. So if you don't feel compassion for the heartbeat of the world, which Jesus did when he wept at the tomb of Lazarus, he knew he was going to resurrect him, but he wept. Jesus wept, John 11:35. He basically felt the pain of the human condition. By his stripes we are healed, by his scourging, by his whipping, while he was still alive. There's all that preliminary before he was actually crucified. and this is our healing. Now, if we have a Christianity which only talks in judicial terms about the cleansing of sin in terms of eternal life and not dealing with our pain and our grief now, and I'm just going to chip something else in as well, because there's a text I want to come to later on in Ezekiel 9, which is connected strongly to that. And it's also connected to the eschaton, which is the end times, and Revelation 13, the beast, because it's like an inversion of what happens in Revelation 13. And it talks about a mark on the forehead, but this is a mark of righteousness that's placed in the forehead of the people all through Jerusalem. Everybody else is wiped out. It's similar to Passover, but they have this mark on their foreheads, which is parallel kind of to the mark of the beast. But the people who don't get killed, who have this mark, are those who grieve, mourn, and lament for the state of the world and how bad it is, which is telling us, a bit like Jesus, the suffering servant, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. If on a basic human level of compassion, which is God's heart for humanity, those people who've got the hallmark in these times at the end of Jesus Christ are people who mourn, grieve, lament. They don't have simple and easy answers. They understand and recognize the pain of the world. And Jesus came to bear the pain of us all, the healing of us all, the mental health, trauma. It's not just epilepsy. It's not just demon possession. You know, we're living in a different world now in its presentation. So we've really got to take seriously how Christians need to be shown up in the world with a lot of compassion, with a commitment to healing, with a commitment to seeing that Jesus is the healer of trauma as well, not just the forgiver of sins.
Well, we get back to this Christian term, don't we? Over 50% of this nation's allegedly Christian. How much of that is really truthfully Christian as it's defined, Alex? You know, there's a lot of people say they're Christians and they certainly don't act like Christians, because I thought I was a Christian because I went to a Church of England school and I've been christened. So I thought, as far as I was concerned, all I had to do was just believe in that Jesus was real and I would be saved. And there's a little, you know, it seems that there's a slightly little bit more to it than that. So how much of the 50% have we actually got, and how much of that 50% could be fooled to jump on board to an Abrahamic Accord system that everybody can agree that anybody who actually truly believes Jesus was God in flesh is to be killed? You know, this doesn't seem a million miles away from possibilities, does it?
No, for sure. But I suppose it's the quality. It's the quality of the Christian witness in the Christians who are living in the world. You know, at the end of the day, we're the light of the world and the salt of the earth. If we are, if we're not, it's worse than not being a Christian, because you're the carrier of hope, that beacon, that salt that can impact people. But in fact, you do put your lamp under a bushel. Yet you're carrying the message of truth, but then you sell it out. So it's imperative that we walk around with compassion and empathy. And that message of Jesus is for healing as well. Healing, because that's what people need. Most people will argue all day about what truth is. Oh, well, I'll contest that because that's not my version of truth. But if they're there with their leg hanging off and somebody comes and shows compassion and kindness and really bleeds with them and is really with them, and that person feels it, what are they experiencing then compared to talk of miracles and talk of eternity? Most people, when it comes down to it, Jesus turned up and he preached the gospel of the kingdom, but he met people where they were at, in the needs where they were at. He had compassion for them where they were at, and he mediated the gospel truth through his behavior, his treatment of people, his healing presence. And that's what the church is called to be. And if it isn't, it's part of the show, I'm afraid.
Well, that's where I'm aiming at. The people that say the Christians, are these going to be easily swayed? You know, can Donald Trump say not only has he converted to Judaism, but he is a Christian, and have people like Kenneth Copeland, who's clearly not a Christian, but promotes all that, and people are saying, "Yay, we're all Christians again, and we can all wave these flags, and we can all feel good about ourselves." It's so easily done. We've seen it so many times throughout history. At this point, Russ, have you got anything to throw in to the ring at this point?
Oh yeah, definitely. Alex had brought up Revelation 13, which is like one of my favorite chapters out of Revelation, because it's one that people misconstrue a lot, especially when it comes to the beasts. They usually think that the beast from the sea and beast from the land represents a single human entity, but when we break it down in the context of Scripture, we see a completely different story. So I'll take you guys really fast to Daniel 7. And this is Daniel's night vision of the four beasts. Daniel spake and said, saw in my vision by night, and beheld the four winds of heaven stove upon the great sea. Keep in mind, remember that the great sea, and four beasts on the sea, verse one from first like a lion and had eagle's wings. Beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon its feet as a man, and as a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had three between its teeth of it. Um, and they said thus unto, and I beheld, and after this I beheld, and lo, like a leopard, uh, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it four wings of a fowl. The beast had also four heads, and dominion was given to it. And after this, I saw in the night vision and beheld a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue which with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And I considered the 10 horns, and behold, there come up among them another little horn, before whom there were three of the first horns plucked up by its roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So we have these four beasts coming out of the sea. So the first one was like a lion, the second one was like a bear, the third was like a leopard, and the exceedingly great beast that had 10 horns. So now, if we go to Revelation 13, and I stood upon the sand of the sea. I'm picking up right at the beginning of the chapter. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns. Remember the horns from that fourth beast? And upon his head the names of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like a bear, and his mouth was like a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Now, check out what John did here. He said it's like a leopard, like a bear, like a lion. Now, we go back to Daniel, most order the beast that Daniel saw. He saw the lion, the bear, the leopard. So these same three animals, but in reverse order. So Daniel gives them lion, bear, leopard. John gives it um, leopard, bear, lion. So it's in a reverse order. We know that Daniel's represented Babylon, Medo Persia, and Rome. So when we compare why Daniel and John give them in a reverse order, well, that's temporality. We have Daniel seeing these kingdoms rise in power from his point of time looking forward. So he's seeing the rise of Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, and Rome from his position in time, while John is in his point of time looking at Rome, the fourth beast, and then seeing the other ones going back: Rome, Greece, Medo Persia, Babylon. So that's why we have that reverse order going on there. Daniel's looking forward into the future. John's looking into the past from his point of time looking back. So these four beasts represent these empires. But why are they culminated into this one beast? Well, this one beast represents what these empires are. They are Gentile nations without the rule of God. And so we know that this beast in Revelation 13 is culminated in the Roman Empire. Because the and the horns as the fourth beast in Daniel 7. What's really troublesome is with this next beast. Now, the rest of this describes what the Roman Empire did. So, in the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet was like that of a bear, and his mouth was like a seat and his great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it was wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the beast, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?"
Are you still talking, Russ? Because you've been cutting in and out. Are you still there? Can you hear me, Alex?
Yeah. I was wondering what was causing the distortion, because you're breaking up a bit. I thought, is this at my end? But obviously,
It might be my
it's
end.
still with
So where was I cutting out at? What all did you guys pick up, and what did I miss?
Yeah, I'll just chip in that at some point, hopefully later on, we'll look a little bit at Ezekiel chapter 9, Paul, because it's a very interesting inversion of Revelation 13. I only noticed it the other day. And it's definitely got that resonance. It's because Ezekiel's such a cool prophet, and it's brilliant what he said. And it's definitely got a connection to Revelation 13.
Right on. Okay, so let's see. I'll tie into Ezekiel 9. Because Ezekiel 9 is like a really, really good chapter. So we'll run through that as well. With Revelation 13, so we see this first beast from the sea, and we see this is a culmination of 4 empires that had rose to power. So that beast from the sea is a representation of those 4 empires. But what comes after that is something a little different. Let's go ahead and pick for the beast in Beast from the Land. Yes, right here. So I'll pick up Revelation 13 and 11. 13 verse 11. And I beheld another beast coming out of the earth, and he had 2 horns and he spake like a dragon. And he exceeded for him, and caused the earth to worship the first beast, who is he, and he doeth great wonders, and that he make fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles, which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an which had the wound, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast. Image of the beast, as would not work, the beast should be killed. And he called both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark. No man may tell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast, and the number of the beast, for the of a man, his 66.
You're cutting out really
that's
bad.
a solid number too. So a lot of people. Oh, that might be my internet. Let me double check my connection real quick. I'll be right back.
Okay. Jeez, and I thought Alex was the one that had internet issues.
Well, that's why I've tried to stay away from everything tonight. I thought everything would work smoothly. Have you got anything to add to that, Alex?
Well, not specifically at the moment, because I think Russ probably needs to finish his angle, and he is going to bring Ezekiel 9 in. But obviously, when we go to Scripture, we've got to have this dialogue between what Scripture is saying and spot these connections, because, you know, again, we know that you'll look at one extract of Scripture and you've got to carefully study it. So the stuff I was saying about Isaiah 53, most people know, it's a bit like what you were saying about, and you regularly say about Hello Ben Shakar. Once people have created this idea that Lucifer is Satan, they'll read it back into the text. Once
Exactly.
people see Isaiah 53 as a classic description that Jesus came to save people from their sins as Messiah, then they're just not going to be reading Isaiah 53 in terms of the vital importance of healing, mourning, grieving, and by, you know, again, he was scourged. In other words, we're healed by his scourging before he even died, which shows you the whole process of his life, all the suffering he took on board. But people typically don't read those verses in the way that they should, because once they've got a template of what it means, it gets entered into some filing cabinet, some theological filing cabinet, and then they just read it blindly and they just repeat what they already believed and just use it to reinforce what they already believed, and they don't get involved in a close inspection of the text. And this is what Russ is doing here by comparing Daniel in various dispatches with Revelation 13. It's the only way you can get that context, and noticing subtle differences like inversions with the leopard, the bear, and the lion being inverted. There's got to be something in that. There's a clue. Same with Ezekiel 9 being an inversion of the theme of Revelation 13. There's information in that. Most people don't look carefully enough to see that nuance. It's very revealing.
Well, then when we're looking at all those passages that all have those meanings, they're the ones that we're not able to talk about. They're the ones that don't matter. They're the ones that end up corrupt and things like that. Yeah, all the Israeli Jews that don't get taught Isaiah 53, they all believe that is about Jesus, and they all believe it's New Testament, yet it's in their own Torah. So it just goes to show how easy it is with all these religions and all these denominations, with all these subtle changes, are good enough. There's the debate going on in the chat now about God is within everybody again. It's yes, he is. But if you don't believe that Jesus was God in flesh, you don't have him and you don't have him who sent him. So it doesn't matter whether you believe or not. You've got to have a better understanding. That's scriptural. It's nothing to do with anything else. It's not debatable in that way. If it isn't scriptural, we can debate it. But let's go off scripture being the foundation. I think that's where we've got to start.
Yeah, well, clearly, whenever people say God is within everyone, it's a clear heresy. It's just wrong. And the thing about that, and when I say that, the thing is, once you tease out theology properly, God is entirely other to his creation. So you've got God, the creator, and his creation. And everything that is created is contingent upon God, dependent upon God, upholding that created thing however he does it. So with us, it's his breath within us, and he's radically other to us, and that's why Jesus had to come and bridge that gap. The thing is, this gets into the philosophy of metaphysics, where metaphysics is basically our understanding of the nature of reality. And when you start saying God is within us, you're into pantheism. Everything becomes a part of God. You know, the television that's in front of me now is God's a part of that. That's a part of God. No, that's a television it's created. And then people go, well, if he's omnipresent, that means he's everywhere. But then it starts to become meaningless. You've got to maintain the distinction between God, who's outside of space and time, and his creation. And if you just say, well, yeah, that tree is a part of God, well, it isn't. It's part of creation.
Can you not see the chat room,
Okay.
Alex?
Yeah.
Well, I have to put it on.
up, Denny?
Specifically.
What's up, Denny?
Go on, Russ. Are you back?
Yeah. I'll talk for a few minutes with you guys just to make sure I'm cutting up.
Yeah, you're cutting in and out still, mate.
Okay. So is it doing all right now? Am I cutting in and out or?
Yeah, you are going. Just go for it, mate. Let's see how we go.
Just let me know if it gets too bad, and I'll just backtrack. That studies. John gives us leopard, bear, lion, and then a dragon gives it exceeding power. So we see that this fourth beast, Daniel, is seeing is the session of the beast that Daniel saw in reverse because he's looking in time, Daniel looking forward in time. But this beast that comes out of the sea is the Roman Empire. Now, what's interesting is what comes after this beast from the sea, and that's the beast from the land. And I beheld another. He had two horns like a lamb, and he is the first beast before him. And the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. It's like a dragon. In biblical prophecy, especially in the book of Revelation, the lamb represents Jesus Christ, but the dragon represents Satan. So if we go based on establishing the canon of Daniel 7, Revelation 13, we know not individuals. So it rises up out of the land as like a lamb, has the appearance of Christ, but speaks like a dragon. So it's evil in speech. So it does satanic things. So when we look at this first beast, we know that ends in the Roman Empire. But what rose after the Roman Empire? It's still in succession. Or what one nation state on the planet right now appears has horns like, which appears Christ-like, but indeed in action is evil and satanic. And that's where we can place ourselves in this point of prophecy. So if we look at some of our Western nations, we've built our entire political system on the ideologies of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
The continuation of that empire through our United States, we see it in hold on one second. Thank you. Sorry, my youngin came in here for a second. But we see it with the United Nations. We see it with the European Union. We see it with the United States, with NATO. We see all these nations. They all still model themselves after Roman diplomacy. So they're just like the beast from the sea, but they're the beast from the land. Hey, we're Christian nations. You know, we have horns like a lamb, but then we're going to go over here and we're just going to blow people off the face of the planet for some oil. That's kind of evil in action. You see what I'm saying? And then we oppress other nations and stuff like that. I mean, this is no secret. All the records from, what was it? USAID or whatever got released. Yeah, we're literally overturning governments and countries and stuff. Totally black ops. So we can see that this beast from the land is actually probably more than likely our Western society. But what does this beast from the land do? Well, he causes people to take a mark on their head or in their hands. Now, a lot of people have interpreted this as a physical mark upon the flesh. But we know in Revelation, anybody who takes this mark is damned. You're going to the lake of fire. You're going to be tormented forever. So how can a mark on the flesh damn the soul? Because Jesus himself said, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. It's more profitable that one of your members should burn than your whole body perish in hell. So a mark on the flesh is superficial. You could put a chip in me and I can remedy that with a sharp blade and a bottle of whiskey. Really quick and easy. But the mark of the beast has a little bit more to do with the soul than it does with the flesh. So we can go to the parallels of the mark of the beast in the Torah. So we've got Deuteronomy 6, 6 to 9. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in your heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto your children, and shalt take of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou layest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them as a sign on thine hand, and they shall be as forelets between your eyes. And thou shalt write them upon the post of thy house and on thy gates. And then again in Deuteronomy 11, 17 to 20, and the Lord's wrath be kindled against you, and he shut up the heaven, that there be no rain, and that the land yield not her fruit, unless ye perish quickly from off the good land which the Lord giveth you. Therefore shall ye lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul, and bind them as a sign upon your hand, and let them be as forelit between your eyes. And ye shall teach them your children, speaking of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou layest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt write them upon the doorposts of thine house and upon thy. So a lot of purpose, and as physical, they'll put it on their hand, wrap it up with a leather strap. They'll put a little box on their forehead, and that's how they interpret this verse. But we know that as those who walk in the Spirit, we interpret Torah spiritually. So what is this? This is literally putting the words and the laws and the ideologies of God as the forefront of your life. It is the work of your hands. It's the first thing on your mind. So why is the beast doing this? Why is the beast putting something on somebody's hand and their forehead? Well, it's their allegiance to that beast system. They learn it. They teach it to their kids. They think about it going to sleep. They think about it rising up. And we see this today. And a lot of people say, well, that's patriotism. Yeah, sure is. But here's the thing. We have to be more patriotic for the kingdom of God than for the kingdoms of this earth. And that's where the mark of the beast is. Where's your allegiance lie? Does your allegiance lie with the man-made systems? Because in the beginning, when God cut us off from the tree of life, what did he say? Lest we live forever and be like who? Him. So what do? We create empires. We create nations. We create councils. We create entities that live longer than a man. Coca-Cola's been around longer than me. Coca-Cola's lived a lot longer than any man on this earth. Same with Nintendo. Same with the United States, founded in 1776, yet it still continues to this day. So we breathe immortality into these systems, into this beast system, and then we pledge our allegiance to that, and then we live for it for the rest of our lives. But here's the thing. Now, God does seal his people, and that's where Ezekiel 9 comes into place. God sets a seal upon his people.
Yeah. So did you want to add to that bit, Alex, before? Because Taylor's busting a gut in the chat, in the private chat, wanting his spot in the spotlight.
Yeah. I don't specifically want to add, but it's an interesting inversion because it shows the importance of this idea of the seal, but not just the seal. It's what characterizes that seal. It's the characteristics of those people who mourn. God wipes out everybody who isn't lamenting the condition that things have got to in Jerusalem. In other words, if you've got fidelity to God, you'll have God's heart, you'll have his view of that which destroys the good of his creation. So he creates creation good, depravity, iniquity, sin, treachery, the kind of stuff we see in politics, the kind of stuff we see in the world today, all of that stuff, the people of God were complicit in. They were doing exactly the same. There was no distinction between them, even though they were part of a covenant pledge, and the rest. And it's much worse because they had the covenant pledge and they were just as bad as everyone else. So God said, enough is enough. My seal will be put on the heads of all those people who grieve, who mourn, who struggle, who find what's going on reprehensible. So there has to be a moral repugnance to what's going on in the world. We have to detach ourselves from that. We have to come out of Babylon. That is the discerning aspect, the differentiating aspect. Now, if we're voyeuristic and all that we really do is play the game and watch the show, and we're in the Truman Show, but we claim that we're better because we've got a doctrinal truth about Jesus, whereas these other people haven't, then we're a part of the show. And the point is to not be a part of the show. And so God is showing with that seal the hallmark of what you know, when we're under the cosh and decisions are made by politicians and we're relatively powerless, where's your heart at? You know, how are you living with respect to this? How are you still going to show compassion? Even in the church, you get these big mega churches that are doing top of the pops every Sunday and being hip and groovy and down with the cool kids. And they are performative and they're parrots copying what sells in the world, like branding Levi jeans. Are you wearing the right jeans? Are you seem to be doing the right thing? Are you attracting the kids to come into the church? Because kids need the modern stuff, man. Right? So basically, if you're selling it and pitching it at that level, you're selling the superficial and the cosmetic. So the hallmark here is suffering, pain, grieving, mourning. Jesus Christ was a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. By his stripes we are healed. We all need to be healed before we're saved. We have to be healed. If you're unhealed, you're say deranged, you become mentally unwell, you're unstable. What God are you believing in anyway? The God that you're making up? If you've got a distorted and psychotic view of reality because you've been fed a cultural lie and you've internalized it, you don't even see God straight anyway. So the point about Jesus coming is to heal, is to put us into a right state again in the face of the culture. So this is why Ezekiel 9 is a very important parallel text to Revelation 13.
Right, now at that point, because we're talking about the show, Taylor, where do you want to join your thread? We're not jumping to a new thread until you join this thread, because we've mentioned the show that's going on. We're seeing the Red Cross now can deliver aid to Gaza because Bibi's sorted it. Now, you say he's not Bibi. We see Trump is definitely against this New World Order when he comes over to Scotland, calls the Mayor of London a useless idiot and a nasty
Oh, that
man.
was a great thing,
Well,
and it shows that he's the one in charge too, because they went into Scotland, and usually whenever a leader goes overseas and to meet another leader, they usually do it in their place. But in this case, Trump went to England and made the prime minister come to his house. That was come to his mansion in Scotland. That was just amazing. It was a good show to show that to show that Trump is the one in charge and he has the power, or rather by extension the Q operation, and not these reprehensible European leaders. I mean, he did the same thing with what's that chick, the leader, the head of the EU, whatever her name is. But it was pretty cool. Now the people of the UK should understand on a whole. Hey, maybe we should start being more like the US in the way of trying to have strong borders, have a strong economy, not do this.
That's what he's done, Taylor. That's what he's done. He's fanned those flames, and his mate Farage is coming riding in on a silver steed, mate.
I'm looking forward to seeing what Farage adds to the table. If it ends up being him, who knows? We don't know that for certain.
He's the one that's running at the minute. Reform. With how Labour are acting at the minute, they might as well just hand the election to Reform because people have had enough. But as we see many a times, they just hand it over to another person who's still riding the same coat.
It reminds me of but hopefully it doesn't go the way that Canada went. Oh boy, that was not a very good thing. I feel bad for the Canadians right now. I really do. It's such a travesty. But anyway, I have I feel like this is a good time with the Federal Reserve and the central banking system as a whole under serious threat. I think it's about time that we go over this this system, and this article is a good encapsulation of it. So let me just go ahead and read this. The bold effort that the bold effort the present bank had made to control the government is but a premonition of the fate that awaits the American people should they be deluded into a perpetuation of this institution or the establishment of another like it. End quote. President Andrew Jackson, circa 1832, fearless slayer of the nation's second central bank. Because we've been dealing with the central bank crap since the inception of the nation. We had British agent Alexander Hamilton. He was he set up the first central bank in under President Washington. It had a 20-year charter, and after the 20-year charter was set to expire, President Madison let it expire, and then very conveniently, the British start stirring up crap over here, and we had the War of 1812. So, and then in order to pay off all the money that we had to spend for that, we ended up President Madison ended up being reluctantly persuaded to install the second central bank, which was then killed by Andrew Jackson because he personally suffered in the stock market crash of 1819, of which he personally suffered, and he was a high-ranking general he was a war hero in the War of 1812. When he became president, his goal was to kill the bank, and that's exactly what he did, and he nearly lost his life in the process. It's called the Bank War. It's a very, very good story. I definitely recommend reading the book called The Tale of Andrew Jackson. It's a very, very interesting story. And just like how George Washington warned us in his farewell address not to do political parties, Andrew Jackson warned us not to have a central bank and to never do it again. Anyway, continuing. At least on an intuitive level, more and more Americans are coming to sense that the Federal Reserve Central Bank may not be serving the country's best interests. It is impossible for even the dimmest captive subject in all of normedom to miss the fact that the cost of living keeps going up, up, and up, as the standard of living, especially for younger people, keeps going down, down, and down. But how many folks actually understand the how and why of this wicked institution's destructive magic mechanisms? It all seems so complicated, doesn't it? Well, it's actually very simple. When someone, that would be yours truly, knows how to break down the impenetrable mystery into such clear and concise language that even an economic illiterate can understand. You see, they only make it seem complicated so that you guys won't sniff out the bullshit. You see, they, in a nutshell, is all that a responsible citizen really needs to know about this monetary monster that has been tormenting us since that fateful and unlucky first year of the Woodrow Wilson presidency, 1913. And as we know, the stock market crash of 1907 was engineered by the bankers, by J.P. Morgan and Jacob Schiff. They engineered the stock market crash after a year after Jacob Schiff was on the floor of the House and warned that if we don't bring back the central bank, there could be a stock market crash. Yeah, he foretold us. More like he freaking planned it that way. Anyway, so we had the Jekyll Island meeting, and of course, we had Nelson Aldrich, his the paternal grandfather of the 5 famous Rockefeller sons. His railway car was used for the Jekyll Island meeting, and then the head of the the Congress, they turned down the original Aldrich bill because they saw what it was. And then they just repackaged it into the Federal Reserve System. They just they just commercialized it as a different under a different name, and people fell for it because it's called a Federal Reserve System. Instead of calling it a central bank, they called it a system, and then people fell for it.
Well, Trump stated, hasn't he, just now that there's definitely not going to be a digital central bank digital currency for America.
Exactly. So, we have the 1830s cartoon depicts Jackson killing the Hydra Monster Central Bank. And then we have a 1910 illustration portrays the coming return of a U.S. central bank as a deadly octopus which would dominate the nation. German Jewish Rothschild agent Paul Warburg is known as the father of the Fed. He was the head of the New York branch of the Fed, which is the system's nucleus. And they're really the ones in charge at the end of the day. For the first several decades of the Fed, they had to put up a Goyim patsy as the figurehead of what people see on the Fed. But then after World War II, even that faded away, and they started to put openly Jewish people on the head of the Fed. Ever since the last 50 or so years, we've had nothing but Jewish heads of the Fed, going back, Alan Greenspan, Yellen, Bernanke, Volcker, etc., etc. Of course, now we have Jerome Powell because, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me just keep going with this. False advertising. For the purpose of misleading the public, the central bank was branded the Federal Reserve System. In reality, it is not federal, it is not hold reserves, and it is not a decentralized system. Since its conspiratorial inception in 1913, the Fed has been a privately owned, state-enabled currency monopoly containing no actual hard reserves and dictatorially run as a single entity. Number 2, lack of transparency. The Fed's quote-unquote auditing is done internally and by the Government Accounting Office. These are fake audits, as Ron and Rand Paul have always said, as such audits are akin to allowing a mafia boss to self-audit his books and report his findings. Monetary inflation. Engineered booms. The Fed creates 100% of our currency out of thin air and loans every single dollar into the economy at interest. Because principal plus interest, P plus I, is always greater than principal alone, the government, businesses, and consumers must forever remain in perpetual and growing debt because new loans, debt currency injection, are required to pay off the old loans. And that's how that works because, anytime that they need to pay off something, they print more money, which ends up creating more debt. A, direct and indirect purchase of government bonds. This economic crime is against the people is done through 3 mechanisms: direct and indirect purchase of government bonds. Open market operations injects money into the economy. B, loans to banks, discount window. And C, relaxation of lending standards established for the nation's banks. Decreased reserve requirements, lowering of interest rates. As the principal plus interest virus exponentially spreads throughout the economy, inflationary bubbles, booms, form in equities and real estate. The value of the currency itself is thus perpetually debased. I should also mention that they do not require a central bank to do this. All that it does is make it much easier for them to do it. At the heart of the issue isn't even the Federal Reserve or the central banking system itself. It's the whole banking practice of fractional reserve lending, which is lending money at interest. That whole system was banned in Europe and around the world for centuries until relatively recently when it was brought back by you-know-who. So it's really a criminal racketeering. It's a Ponzi scheme, a snake oil salesman. That's what it is. Because even without a central bank, we had economic collapses through the same methods. It's just much more difficult without it. Continuing though, monetary contraction, engineered bust, sale of government bonds removes money from the economy, tightening of loans to banks, raise interest rates, and tightening of general lending standards established for the nation's banks, increased reserve requirements, higher interest rates passed on to borrowers. As new money becomes harder to come by, scarcity, The bubbles pop, and it becomes harder for businesses and people to obtain enough currency to repay their open loans. Equities and real estate collapse as bankruptcies and unemployment rise. The big boys then buy up assets on the cheap and simply wait for the next boom to arrive before they sell off again. That's what Nathan Rothschild did during the Battle of Waterloo, and how he made it, and how he multiplied his fortune several times, and then bought England. And authors know, even with the gold standard money system and no central bank, large banks were still creating boom-bust cycles by lending out banknotes without actual reserves to back them up. Fractional reserve banking. This is what I was talking about. These abuses would be corrected by inevitable panics and bank runs. The establishment of a central bank facilitated the ability of member banks to create bubbles without consequences because the Fed's discount window and bailout capacity act as printer of last resort, actually, for banks without enough reserves. It just makes things much easier. Column 1, the system of branch cities, represented by different letters on various bills, was a trick to make people believe that the Fed was not an all-powerful central bank, but rather a decentralized system. The boom-bust cycle is not natural. It is scientifically engineered in time by the internationally connected money masters for their benefit. So basically, these are all here to, they put them on the back of the bills. They used to do that back in the early days of the Fed, because each state would have its own central bank, right? To make it look like that it's a system and decentralized, when in fact it's all just for show. The one, the system's nucleus is in New York, and that's the one that really matters. The others are really just for show. Bernanke criticizes attempts to audit the Fed. Yeah, back in 2009, Ben Bernanke used a hearing for his reconfirmation as Federal Reserve Chairman on Thursday to express concern about legislation that would put the Fed on a tighter leash and let Congress second-guess his decisions. What was Benny so afraid of? And the next, election interference. The Fed's potential to contract an economy can be used to deliberately take down any sitting president. Herbert Hoover in 1932. Yep, that's what happened to Herbert Hoover. There was a Republican dynasty that was controlling everything since the days of Abe Lincoln. Only a couple people got in there, like Wilson, due to rigging. That's a whole story with the rigged election of 1912. But yeah, they wanted to kill that Republican dynasty, so they crashed the economy in 29 in order to, and everyone blamed Hoover because they don't understand exactly how this works. So they just blame the president. And so Hoover he won in a landslide in 1929, and then he lost in a landslide to FDR in 1932. So that's how, they get presidents as well. Or congressional blocks. Republicans in 1958. The Republicans had a majority in the Senate in 1958, and they rigged the economy, not to hurt Eisenhower because he was their boy, but the press would blame the Republicans, which means that the Democrats would gain the Senate and the Congress in the 58 midterms, and they would never get it back until 1994 under Clinton, because Clinton was such an open Marxist that people saw through him. But continuing, that defies the globalist agenda. Likewise, it can elect or prop up a preferred president or party. Clinton in 1992, they rigged the economy against H.W. Bush in order to get Clinton in there. Obama in 2009 to 2017, they rigged.
Hang on. Who rigged the economy against Bush?
The Federal Reserve, the central bankers, the people in charge of the Fed. They wanted.
So are you saying that Federal Reserve was that Bush was in against the Federal Reserve?
No. No. See, the way it works is that there's, and I mentioned this before, there's multiple factions to the New World Order. You have your Zionists, you have your globalists, and they have a lot of interlocking in between them. And sometimes one faction gains power over another. It's like a battle between two crime families, and really a battle of, how should I put this? It's a battle of methods rather than a battle of ideologies. So the thing is that they were pissed off at Bush in 1991 because he wouldn't go all the way to take down Saddam Hussein in the first Gulf War. He wouldn't go all the way to Baghdad, because he was one of those globalists that wanted to rig. He wanted to kill Iraq slowly and not do a full frontal assault, which is what the hardcore Zionists, the Israeli firsters, wanted. So they got their boy Clinton in there because he was much more easily controlled, and he was also, yeah, Clinton. And then same thing in 2008. Even though Bush was leaving, and he was leaving his second term, what they wanted to do was they wanted to kill the Republican Party. Again, they wanted to get their boy Obama in there because he was groomed for decades to become president. He was their Black Jesus, as they say, and so they wanted to make sure that the Republican candidate would never get in. And so then they propped up John McCain as to do a straw man campaign, intentionally lose to Obama because he was their boy. And then, of course, they keep the interest rates at zero under Obama for his entire 2 terms, because they had to make it look like that there was somewhat of a resemblance of an economy, despite all the Marxist hardcore government spending that Obama was doing. And then when Trump came in, Janet Yellen, head of the Fed at the time, also Jewish, said that she was going to. She literally came out and said that she was going to rig the economy against Trump. And of course, that's when Trump let her go, and he put his boy Jerome Powell in there. So there you go. They rig elections by doing this. So by keeping the easy money supply flowing, presidents fear the Fed, and the president of the United States cannot fire a Fed chairman, even when they don't rig the economy intentionally. At the end of the day, the president's going to be afraid. They know that they can rig the economy against him, and then the media, which they also control, will blame the president, and everyone will fall for it, and then they'll vote the man out of office and get the cabal's preferred candidate in there. They also did this with Jimmy Carter in 1979. They wanted him out because the Zionists wanted him out because he wasn't because he did some things he wasn't supposed to, and so they got Bush under Reagan in there, and they crippled Reagan. So that's a whole different story right there. Pay dividends to owners for doing nothing. The Fed stock is owned by the national banks. Their shares, like all corporations, owned mainly by the big boys. The Fed pays its shareholders, banks, a 6% dividend based on the money it stole by charging interest on currency created out of thin air. It claims to have paid out $1.6 billion in 2024, but given the Fed's secrecy, who really knows if that number is even accurate? And that's true. Because they tell us it's this amount of money. How do we know that it's not more? Because the Fed is never audited. So, which is changing, obviously. But we're talking about historical facts here. Off the books crimes. There have been cases of large sums of paper money, Federal Reserve notes, being shipped and distributed to parties unknown, such as Iraq in 2007, and Iran in 2016. To this day, no explanation has been given for these obviously criminal events. And by the way, Q talks about these 2 events right here. Shipping money, like millions of dollars of paper notes, not through the wire, but through physical dollars to both Iran and Iraq. It's I would have to do a whole show on that individually, because that's a whole different can of worms right there. Insider trading. Because the Fed controls the never-ending boom/bust cycle, well-connected individuals and institutions with advanced knowledge stand to profit enormously at the expense of smaller, unconnected shareholders on both the ups and downs. Are we to believe that this doesn't happen? Nancy Pelosi is the perfect example of this, and I'm sure you know about that. She was she's been in the news a lot recently regarding that insider trading. How people in the government know where the economy is going, so they can get stocks and get in and out of the economy at the right opportune time. That's what happens every single boom bust cycle. In 1929, Bernard Baruch, J.P. Morgan, and all those people got out of the economy just before got out of the stock market just before the stock market crashed, because they knew it was coming, because they were the ones rigging it. So at the end of the day, if you know what's going to happen, you make a lot of money off of it. And then when the stocks are at absolute zero, you buy them up for a penny of a dollar. That's what Nathan Rothschild did in the 1810s during the days of Napoleon. And now you know. There, see how easy that was? The good news? Q promised to end the endless and usher in an honest monetary system based upon gold. And Andrew Jackson Trump clearly seems to be moving in that direction. And we can clearly see that. Let's see here. The Jewish Mafia Bank deliberately crashed the markets and the economy in 1929 by rapidly contracting the money supply. The Fed continued throttling the economy until 1932 so that President Hoover could be falsely blamed by the Jewish Mafia media and then replaced with the globalist taxer, spender, and warmonger Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Rate hike puts Yellen at odds with Trump's plans for economic growth. Donald Trump prediction in September that the Federal Reserve would raise interest rates once Obama was out of office has come true, though it's not clear what he thinks about it. This is an old headline. In 2017, Fed Chair Yellen attempted to undermine Trump's economic growth agenda. New York Times, New York Fed's $40 billion Iraqi money trail. CNBC has been called the largest airborne transfer of currency in the history of the world. By finding out what happened to all the money involved has become one of the biggest financial mysteries of all time. Of course, there's also the $2.3 trillion under Donald Rumsfeld. I'm sure you know about that one. So, yeah, this is really exactly what the Fed is. It controls. It not only controls economies, it also controls politics. Because, like, as I said, they rig the markets. They get someone out that they want out, and they put their guy in that they want in, and then they hold interest rates low when the guy that they want to have is in, so that way that they can prop up their candidates. And, I'll just add on to this also. Another thing they do in order to prop up a candidate, a president that is looking like that they're failing, is they'll do false flags. So, for example, in 1990, in the early 90s, Bill Clinton was hated so much because of his Marxist agendas, NAFTA, all that stuff that he was doing. And his ratings were in the pits, and it was looking like in 96. The Republicans took back the House in 94 for the first time in nearly 40 years. And so it looked like in 96 that he was going to be thrown out, and a Republican, an America Firster, was going to finally come back into the White House. And then what happened in 95 just before the election? Take a guess.
Go on.
Oklahoma City bombing. Yep. And they got a twofer out of this. The first reason they did Oklahoma City was to bring Clinton back, because as soon as that happened, his ratings spiked right back up. Because he puts on, he goes out in front, he goes out in Oklahoma, and he's he holds the Bible, and he starts saying stuff like, all these sorry people, we have to do something about this. We can't let this terrorism go on. The sappy stories. And so everyone's fell for it. Normies normed, and they fell for it, and they ended up simping for Clinton, and so he was reelected in a landslide in 96. But the second reason they got a twofer out of this one was that they blamed it on Timothy McVeigh. And who did they say Timothy McVeigh was? A far right extremist. Was pro gun control. Was anti-gun control, and was part of the militia movement. So the militia movement was under attack. The America Firsters were under attack. The pro gun owners. So they ended up getting attacked out of this as well. It's just like when Israel took down RFK in 1968. Not only did they stop him from becoming president and uncovering the secrets about his brother, but they blamed it on a Palestinian, Sirhan Sirhan, so they could make it so they could make it look like the Palestinians are evil and that the Israelis are the ones in the right. So they can get these twofers out of the deal too. In 2001, Bush's ratings was actually getting pretty low because of what people were thinking of him. After 9/11, he came right back. Obama's ratings were in the pits in his first few years in office, and it looked like that he was going to be tossed out in 2012. What happens the year before What happens the year before the 2012 election in 2011? I'm pretty sure you know.
What do you think, Alex?
Wait. No, take a guess. What happened in 2011 that brought Obama's ratings back up?
Go on, Taylor. You're on a roll here, mate. You've got to keep talking.
Osama bin Laden, the Osama bin Laden killing, quote unquote killing.
Yeah.
That whole thing. As soon as that happened, Obama's rating shot way up. They brought Osama bin Laden out of the mothballs, and they claimed to kill him, which because obviously everyone hated Osama bin Laden because of 9/11, so his rating shot back up, and he won in 2012 in a landslide against another straw man. What's his name? That CFR puppet they put up in the Republican Party as his quote unquote opponent. I forget. I can't remember his name, but yeah, just like with McCain, he was just a straw man, and the whole thing about it is that they needed their men in the White House, and that's what they do. If rigging the economy doesn't work, they'll just use a false flag, and if that doesn't work, and if they want to get rid of somebody, they'll just assassinate them, or they'll.
So do they need one? Do they need one over there at the minute?
Say again.
Do they need a false flag over there at the minute?
Well, no, because things have changed. Because the deep state's out of business. The Israeli mafia is out of business. The globalists are out. The George Soros types are all out of business. They're done. And if you ask me, I think they've all been executed. But regardless of whether you think they've been executed or put in gitmo, they're gone. And so their globalist agenda is out of the way. And what we're seeing right now is a replay of all this and pushed by the mainstream media in a way where the public is now seeing everything going on openly. When you have people like Zoran Mondami in New York or AOC, the squad. Because here's the thing, the Democrat Party for the last half a century or so has been full-blown Marxist, at least since the days of LBJ, has been a full-blown Marxist party, / communist. But as you know, what's his name that wrote the book about rules for radicals? I keep forgetting the guy's name.
Saul Alinsky.
Yeah, Solinsky. Yeah, as you know, he wrote that book telling you, cut your hair, put on a suit, take a shower, look good, hold the Bible and look good in front of everyone, and then you can bring your communism into the policies, which is exactly what they did. But now we have the AOC and Zoran Mondami types being shown off to the public. And if you ask me, these people are definitely white hat agents. They're military agents. They're set up in order to expose the Democrat Party for how Marxist they really were, because they couldn't wear their communism openly on their sleeve like that, because people obviously are going to turn against you if you do that. Any sensible human being, and so that's what's happening right now. The Democrat Party's in the pits, and it's looking like it's going to be dissolved, which we already know it will be, because Q told us that the Democrat Party, when this is all said and done, it will no longer exist. And so we're really heading on that path. The Democrat Party's in the pits. They're in the 20 in terms of approval ratings. They're heading down into the teens. They can't even manage to win back the House. They have no leader. This whole thing is, the movie, as I've mentioned before, is going in the right direction. It's going the direction that we know it's going to end. It's just a matter of what the plot twists are going to be until we get there. Because, it's a movie. We don't have the script. But with this, I hope I explained exactly just how. I mean, you guys already know how bad central banking is, obviously. But I hope I added some new information that you guys didn't already know. As well as, go ahead.
So where does this now fit in with Trump saying there's not going to be this digital currency? So that completely goes against Europe. It goes against what Starmer's trying to do, which is drag us back into Europe by any means whatsoever. The Americans are now fanning the flames over our free speech. So we're all being drawn into this civil unrest. All of Europe has had enough. But it's what they'll do and how they go about it. Because during when Hitler eventually took over in Germany, you had all these political parties doing the same things as what they're doing now, all obfuscating, all saying we're going to do this, we'll do that. And Hitler came in and changed everything. And I think we're being run into the ground enough where people will accept anything, just like we've done in history. Do you see history repeating itself, Alex?
Okay. Basically, what we're into here, I think, is narrative. And the thing about narrative is it's an orientating reality, and it requires buy-in. So, for example, quite apart from the actual substantive content of what Taylor shared, he has, no offense, by the way, here, Taylor, I'm just using you as an example. So, what he's done, in the context of our lives, every one of us, if we're conscious, is trying to orientate ourselves to make sense of the world. So, the fundamental human requirement is to make sense of who I am in a complex world. Many people don't bother doing that. They become consumerists. They go to work, they earn as much money as possible, like the footballers I spoke about in the past, get myself as consolidated as possible in the material realm, and then I can more or less become bulletproof because I can withstand anything. But for people who actually think, who've not got the, let's call it in inverted commas, the luxury of being able to do so, they're not in a position to do so. They will develop a narrative which we can associate with the word cosmology. Your cosmology is your basic view of the world, our origins, where we came from as a species, where I come from as a human being. On a basic level, I come from the loins of my mother and father, okay? So that's basic biology. But the reality is, I'm brought into this world by those means. I'm orientated within a culture. I become conscious on some level. You know, I start off as a little child, as a baby, not conscious of much. Eventually, I gradually emerge into consciousness. And then I try to make sense of myself as an entity within the world. That's a complex process. I'm influenced by many things within which I'm a relatively passive recipient of experiences. Life does things to me. So you might get abused, bullied, things happen to me. How do I make sense of this cruel world, this evil world? You know, that can come down to parenting, early school life. So we're all on some kind of journey, whether we realize it or not, of making sense of who I am in the context of what the world is. Once we get into politics, culture, many things which transcend myself and my own locus of control, I'm trying to give an account for why the things that happen in the world simply because of the impact those things have on myself. And it's very simple. Unicellular organisms can feel pain. So the starting point is, did this development cause me pain? Did it cause me conflict? Did it cause me cognitive dissonance? If it did, I might notice something. That's the basis of awareness. What do I want to do with that awareness? Do I have internal peace and harmony? Or have I been disrupted somehow by these external events? So we construct sophisticated narratives over time, and we do our diligence and we research. So obviously, what we've got here is Taylor's got a very integrated narrative, which he's researched meticulously. And of course, he's meticulously researched it from his own point of view. We can immediately see that as having objective validity, but it serves a purpose in Taylor's own life because Taylor is seeking to make sense of his world in the context of his life, just like I am. So when we speak, or you speak, Paul, or Russ speaks, we've had a history, we've had a litany of experiences, both good and bad. And this is why we approach Jesus in a particular way. Now, I've heard Taylor in the past. In fact, a couple of shows ago, he talked about Jesus and the Lord, and they say in a way that surprised me. So he keeps a lot of that personal and private. At a certain point, there's a rupture; it breaks through. He states it publicly. Most of the time, he doesn't speak about it openly. So he probably has a more private faith. We have a more public.
Well, I mean, the reason I don't talk about it is because number one, you guys, you guys kind of like drag on and on about the subject so much that it kind of takes the wind that I really don't see any reason to even mention it because you spend, I mean, like, no offense to anyone here, you know, good on you, but Russ especially, just he gives that long speech So it's like, what more can I really add in?
Plenty, right, plenty to. I mean, okay, so plenty. In fact, it would add massively to our perspective, I think. But the point is to speak about personal faith matters can be quite challenging, and it can be quite daunting if you're dealing with people who are operating with the currency of theological ideas a lot of the time. But I wouldn't, if I were you, I would invite you not to be too daunted by that, because your research into your areas specifically of interest are credible. And regardless of whether people agree with you or not, or disagree with you, you've done the work like we have. So ultimately, we may choose to speak about the state of the world, political situation, the cultural situation, but we have delegated some of that to you as our sort of American correspondent with the Trump angle. But we don't have to be so radically separated. And I would invite you to speak more openly and boldly regarding your particular view of faith, because that would add things in. But Luke, if you don't specifically want to do so, that's also fine. The point I'm getting at here, apologies for using you as an illustration, but it's a good illustration. We also come from a particular vantage point, which is an integration of faith as a pure perspective on God and the state of the world, but we also have to engage with the culture as it is. And the problem is there's an interface there between my personal world, my personal sense making, my personal storied reality, and the actual wider world. So some of us might use the Bible more to try and make sense of my particular story. And we might say that Jesus is the Word of God, and he talks about the foundations of truth in the Word that's reliable and solid. We might say, therefore, that political events are more ephemeral. There's shifting sand all the time. Some of us don't want to put our weight on that. But ultimately, looking at Trump, taking a long-term picture, there's a case for saying he could either be ultimately a really big problem, or actually a person who really is genuinely making a massive difference in trying to handle a really difficult, complex world situation. It's very difficult to tell. That's why we need people like yourself, Taylor, doing the research to
Whoa.
because that cogent story we can engage with, even if we don't fully agree with it. So, pardon me for continuing as long as I have, but I think the point here is, in answer to Paul's question, stories are complex. We're usually at the center of our own. We construct those stories first and foremost to make sense of our own experience in our own world, and then we offer that to everybody else to see whether there's any overlap. This basically is just one big ongoing conversation, and we have to have the courage to step up and have the conversation. People in the chat are not participating very much on the live, but they are participating in the chat. Well, what we want to do is reduce the gap between the chat and what we're talking about here. Every week we manage to do so successfully. We're producing a better integration between culture and politics, current affairs and ultimate spiritual values, and the foundation upon which we make sense of ourselves, make sense of our world, and choose to act in the world. I'll shut up now because I think I've said enough. I don't know if that answers your question, Paul.
It does, in a very Alex kind of way. It's,
I
go on.
just want to say that I truly believe, and I've mentioned this in the chat before, that God gave us the Q operation, and that He assigned Trump as the human figure, just as He did with Hitler in the past, in order to save us from the New World Order. And I don't mean that in a theological way. I mean that in a physical way. Obviously, the man's not perfect. He cheated on his wife several times. He's been with multiple wives. He's done some questionable things. But at the end of the day, we're all human, and
Well, he is promoting these Noahide laws, mate. So those Noahide laws are going to be accepted by the leaders of every major religion. That's what they're going to unite under. So you may be saying this New World Order's not done, but this one world religion is certainly on the horizon. So we've got to keep our our eyes peeled. And like Alex was saying, the meticulous research that you do, you can tell us all that verbatim without even reading it, to be fair, Taylor. But what you've got to do now is join those historical dots to other things, like we were talking about before, the Medici bloodlines and the all that. I think I did send you about the Aldebarini bloodlines. I think I did send you something to have a look at. But this is where what your research is so fundamental on is joining them dots and what they've put into place as this plot. You know, people are up in arms over in Europe and over here over this immigration stuff, but it's government policy. So it's not just about what is going on. We are paying for it whilst thinking that we're entitled to some money back, which we're not entitled to. But when they give it to us, we go, oh, yay, thanks. And we shouldn't be paying this stuff. So, all in all, if we knew what we were doing and we actually acted correctly, we wouldn't have a national debt. The people that we put in place would be all nationals who want this country to thrive instead of what we've got. So, again, I see what Trump is doing over there, Taylor, but we've got to say that I think he's playing both sides, and I think he's meant to play both sides. So, but go on, Alex.
Interestingly here, I remember seeing a comment earlier on from Jane about this Paula White, who is basic, and this is an interesting example, I think, because the question of how we get buy-in is kind of generally grounded in whether we believe our sources. Now, Paula White is kind of an evangelical, charismatic Christian who's obviously married to this, I think he's a celebrity, a musician. And so they got profile, and she's done a lot of good charitable work, and whenever there's floods and so on and so forth, she's got this compassionate ministry, but she's an advisor to Trump from an evangelical point of view. Now, that's where it's important, I think, to consider this, because when you've got popular religion just as well as popular culture, you're getting mass buying from people. And the problem with mass messages is they're always going to be attractively packaged. You can package things however you like to make it look appealing. That's what we call cosmetic. The question is always one of what is the depth? Now, there is no way any message can be self-authenticating. This is why, when Jesus was baptized, the dove descended upon him, and the voice came from heaven, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And there was the other time at the Transfiguration, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." So twice there was a testimony from the heavens where the Father testified to the Son. The problem that we live in a world now where people testify to themselves, they give witness to themselves, they become celebrities in their own right, whether that is this Paula White, whether it's Trump. Trump's been given some celebrity status by some people. So the problem is, when we get past the gloss and the veneer, quite apart from the truth or otherwise of the story, it's how do we get buy into that story? How do we really trust sources? And I don't think any source can be self-authenticating. That's why Jesus said, "By their fruits you shall know them." In a sense, that requires patience. You've got to watch. You've got to, watch and pray. You've got to be discerning. You've got to take your time, not come to knee-jerk reactions. Most of the time, most people in this world have been so oppressed by liberal lefties that anything that isn't like that, they'll immediately think it's brilliant and valid just because it's not like the liberal lefties. So this is because we've been conditioned for so long to, like today with Starmer. After what Starmer's done, anyone's better than Starmer. And the person could be a covert op and vile and gonna build very negatively on what Starmer's done. But because it wouldn't be Starmer, it'd almost like, by definition, be the Messiah. The false Messiah or whatever Messiah it is, because thank goodness it's not Starmer. So to me, all of this, because we're dealing with narrative, is an incentive for each one of us to be very clear on our own discernment tools. How do we work out the true from the false? Now, obviously, I think Taylor does a very, very good job of tracing why he considers very clearly that the Q phenomenon and Trump are aligned, and that this offers something that we can read between the lines and see as a positive momentum. And you've got to give credit to that, because it's complex to trace all of this, but that's a process of discernment. And we have to acknowledge at the end of the day, we can still be wrong. So we never get certainty. You're always in a provisional position. You always got to keep your eyes open, watch and pray. So yeah, whether it's Trump, Paula White, or anybody else, if we just trust the sources because they make claims and there's nothing outside of that to attest to it, that's why as Christians we don't believe Muhammad's claim, because he just testified to himself. I had a revelation in the month of Ramadan in a cave. Here it is. And now we've got billions of people on the face of the planet, got a whole religious system based on the testimony of one man that nobody can corroborate. And that's a big problem.
Well, there is one more article that I wanted to read before we head off, if that's all right.
Can you fire through it?
Say again?
Can you fire through it?
I could try. Okay. Okay, there we go. Oh man, this one put a smile on my face. This one really put a smile on my face. And Ross, as an American, I'm sure you've heard about this one as well. New York Times Corporation for Public Broadcasting will shut down. The company is among the first casualties of a vote to strip roughly $100 million in federal funding from NPR, PBS, and local stations across the country. More winning. Of course, we are all
heard about that.
Yeah. Of course, we are all wary from the movies Turtle-like grind toward the promised great replay of the arrests and executions which have long ago transpired. Nonetheless, so many less dramatic but clearly visible victories, all of which we have dutifully chronicled, just keep piling up week after week after week. The latest delightful news from the article. Quote, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting said Friday that it would shut down next year, effectively ending its half-century role as a backer of NPR, PBS, and local radio and TV stations across the United States. The organization will continue to support public broadcasters through a transition period. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting has been in the crosshairs of Republicans for decades. Conservative policy advocates, legislators, and presidents argued persistently that the public shouldn't be responsible for financing media they perceived as having a liberal bias. But repeated attempts to defund broadcasters failed. Public broadcasters have failed until this year. End quote. It is noteworthy that Project 2025, the quote-unquote controversial right-wing blueprint which Commander Trump is clearly following in so many ways, specifically called for defunding PBS, aka the Public Broadcasting System, and NPR, National Public Radio. Trump once accused NPR of being a quote-unquote liberal disinformation machine, which it is. PBS, propaganda, bullshit, and sophistry. NPR, National Pinko Radio. Though PBS and NPR will still remain in operation for now, it will be challenging for these propaganda outlets to do so with the federally funded CPB shutting down. And that weakened position, and given the reality of Q's control over the airwaves, fairer and more honest versions of both will, if they even survive, emerge. This would be similar to what has already happened at formerly leftist media institutions such as CNN, the Washington Post, Newsweek, etc. PBS and NPR are known for that painfully bland, personally deficient, quote-unquote neutral tone of delivery which educated, quote-unquote, libtards are so attracted into and impressed by. Mistaking smug dullness, verbal I can't pronounce that word, and $10 words for profound intellectualism, the fanboys and fangirls of this brand of dreadfully boring broadcasting fancy themselves as informed on this or that issue of the day. That, boys and girls, is the essence of sophistry. The reality is this. PBS and NPR feed their quote-unquote educated audiences the exact same dumbed-down dung which the screaming simpletons of MSNBC or CNN bombastically dish out to the lower IQ elements of libtardia. It's like taking a $20 kitchen item from Walmart, putting it in a fancy package, and reselling it at Williams Sonoma for $150. Different demographics, different packaging and marketing. That's all. From whence will the universally educated pseudo-intellectual groupies of libtardia get their canned and oh so serious highbrow talking points now? Winning. PBS's CIA showman Bill Moyer and an intelligent liberal, William F. Buckley, a state-approved intelligent conservative, Charlie Rose, an objective quote-unquote talk show host, and Big Bird, a goofy faggy bird. Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously we know Sesame Street, part of that. They've been brainwashing kids for decades. And there's also, of course, Bill Nye, the fake science guy. His show is on there too. So that whole thing, the PBS and NPR, them getting taken down and or revamped is huge. It's a huge win because so many people have been brainwashed for decades over this. I remember uh what's his name from the 90s, who I forget his name, Bill Cooper. I remember Bill Cooper did a show talking about this back in the 90s about Sesame Street, saying how it was encouraging kids to rebel against their parents and to take drugs and stuff like that. I remember him talking about that. And this was back in the 90s. So think about what it's like now. Remember, Elmo was out here telling kids to take their COVID shots.
It was. Well, I mean,
Yep.
Bill Cooper had a finger on the pulse with a lot of things, but he also believed things that weren't true. He believed that the limousine driver for Kennedy shot him. You know,
Popular theory, but I don't believe it.
it's not true. You show me a video that shows a limousine driver, and I'll show you why it's not the limousine driver. We had Mick who came on the show, who's done a lot of research on there, and he believed it was. And I went, go and watch this Zapruder film again. Watch the passenger. Watch how he leans back. Watch how the sun flashes his Brill cream at the right height to make it look like it's a nickel-plated gun. It looks plausible until you actually study it. And that's the problem that we've got with a lot of this stuff. We've got all these opinions. They're all based on what information we've used. Alex started off the show with, we need all the information, the good and the bad, and we've got to discern that ourselves. You're bringing great information, Taylor, but we've got to then try and fit it into what's going on with the narrative. And when we see other factions that are all part of this, where we see, where we see things like the Pythagoras, who inspired all these secret societies from the Rosicrucians to the Masons, all this stuff is encoded within Pythagorean theories. So we see there's a massive amount of jigsaw piece puzzles that we've got to fit your scenario into, and then join the pieces around it. So I think you bring a valuable thing to the show, but as we always say, we've got to keep our minds open, Taylor. So in closing, mate, have you got anything to say for what we should possibly watch for this week and what you might be bringing next week?
Well, as I said, I don't have the script. I don't know exactly what's happening. All I can say is look out for more good stuff because it's been a roll. I mean, we had the Steele dossier getting publicly revealed. Now it's public that Obama and Hillary were in on the Russia hoax, and it looks like, going off of what what's his name said on Truth Social, not Trump, but General Flynn. General Flynn was talking about how it was that Obama had quote unquote a more important role in 2020. Now, obviously, we know that isn't true. But the point is what was Obama in 2020? He was a private citizen, and so presidential immunity doesn't count for him. And so if you get him in if you expose 2020, and you follow it back onto Obama, then you can easily take him down along in an open public court, along with courts with Hillary. Though personally, I feel like this is going to be done in the military court rather than a civilian court, because civilian courts, obviously, that whole system's been compromised for a long time. But in military courts, you don't. There's no such thing as immunity. So at the end of the day, my point is that so much good stuff is happening, and it's amazing. You got to see the tree. You got to see the forest through the trees, and just see what the end result is, and you'll understand whether something is true or not. Because I don't believe everything I read, but whether an article is true or not, whether a story is true or not, just look at the end results, and that should tell you if it's true or not. Really, at the end of the day.
Good point.
Okay, mate. Nice one. Okay, then I'll look forward to what you bring us next week then, because I think it's got to be a bit more fluid, hasn't it? Anyway, so see what happens this week, Taylor, and bring it on next week. I'll send you the link.
Okay.
Thanks, Taylor.
Yep. Is it okay if I ask you if we can bring someone on that I recommend, like somebody that I would like to have be brought on here?
You've already tried this, and he ran off, mate.
Yeah, that's true. But I
As I said, anybody you want to come on, get them to email me, and we can sort something out.
okay, sounds good.
The other fella never emailed me, so
Oh, what, Perloff?
yeah, never heard from him, mate. But
I'm
neither did
still
you.
trying to talk to him, but he's been
That's
busy.
what I mean. Neither did you, anyway. So don't worry about it. I'll send you the link for next week. Thanks for your time, Taylor.
Yeah,
Have a
no
good
problem.
week,
And thanks
mate.
for having me on again. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
No, always, mate. Take care. God bless, brother.
Yep, God bless.
Ross, what have you got in wrapping up for us tonight? Providing your internet's back.
Yep, hopefully it works out. I'll just add to what Taylor was saying about Trump being set up by God and stuff, and that is true. Daniel 2:22, Daniel's prayer says, and he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and he sets up kings. He gives wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. So we can trust in God at the end of the day that all things work out for him and according to his sovereign will. So we just keep our eyes on Christ and keep moving forward in this twisted and fallen world.
Nice one, brother. Again, thanks for giving up your time for us, Ross. We really appreciate your input, and we really appreciate the message that you bring as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no problem. It's always a pleasure to be here and to talk with you guys. I wish my internet would have cooperated a little better today, but there's always next week. We'll jump on.
But
And,
we'll be back next week, brother. We'll be back next week.
Right on.
Yeah. Cheers, Russ.
Take care, Ross. God bless,
All
mate.
right, thanks guys. God bless. Have a good week, and I'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank
Yeah.
you, sir. Anything in closing from you, Paul?
I don't know, really. Usually I've got something.
Usually have.
Yeah, well, I think we've covered a lot of areas, and we are going to continue to come back to the same points in different garb. It's just inevitable. You cannot change people simply by talking about ideas, but the conversation itself is vital. You've no guarantee that you're going to influence people. There is a limit on the power of words to change people. This is the point I was getting at earlier on. If you've only got a confessional stance in a so-called post-truth world, it's like people crying out in the playground, my dad's better than your dad. That is not going to produce anything other than competing claims And the only source then of that claim is the thing that I happen to verbalize, and I claim it's truth. Muhammad claimed that he received the truth from God and is inscribed into his heart in the month of Ramadan in a cave. Well, how do we corroborate that? And so ultimately it's conduct. It's not just conduct, but it's a large part of it. Certainly if our conduct is inconsistent with the message. It's like the guy who says, yeah, I love my wife, but I only beat her up one day a month. And on the other 30 days or whatever, I treat her wonderfully. So it's what you choose to look at, and smoke and mirrors can get us to decoy by looking at the 30 days and going, oh, his claim's genuine. And as long as we don't hear from his wife or his children or the people who really know him on that one day, we might believe him. And people show the best face. They show the 30 days of wonderful conduct. They don't show that day when things went south or the repeated patterns. So the burden of responsibility, the onus, is upon us to have our eyes in our head, to not make any assumptions, to not look at a golden picture that's been sold to us, because all con merchants sell us the 99% truth so they can smuggle in the 1% lie. So that's the most dangerous thing when someone's selling you 99% truth. Nobody believes that Keir Starmer has the best interests of this country at heart. And in that sense, he's somewhat less dangerous. It'd be more dangerous if Farage got in as some sort of corrective figure. This is what we have to be aware of, these sorts of shifts in dynamics.
That's the point.
That's exactly where we're less guarded, because we get the feel-good factor. So we should be more suspicious when all is rosy in the garden. Peace, peace, and then sudden destruction shall come. So it's always about diligence, it's always about vigilance, but at the same time, not becoming completely bogged down in doom porn, not constantly looking for the next shadow to emerge around the corner. We've got to somehow find the right balance between being critically aware and not naive, but at the same time developing the capacity to live our lives thoroughly, because God still created this creation. It's still good. It's been corrupted. It's been blighted. There are still many good reasons to be alive. There are many, many things to celebrate. God is good. So I think the key is, through all of this and this confusing labyrinth of possibilities and obscure positions that we're trying to untangle every week, keep that balance. Remember, life is good, and that it is what you make it, and you've got to choose the side that you're on. And some people might believe that God is some grandfather figure with a long beard, a bit like Gandalf in the sky, or some invisible best friend. And they're entitled to that position. But the reality is, at the end of the day, put your money where your mouth is, demonstrate it, live it, and there's not much else that you can do. We don't have this control over the mechanisms. We are in a perilous position where we try and organise against oppression, because there's always a narrative to try and make out that we're doing something wrong. So you've just got to have the courage of your convictions, understand the story that you're building, and if you've not got God, well, I don't know what your bottom line is, but good luck to you if you don't.
Well, that's the one of the main things that we debate, isn't it, about this? It's right that the kingdom of God is within. It's right that the Spirit lies within. But if you choose to not align yourself with that frequency, that vibration of that Spirit, and walk in it, and the only way to do that is to believe what Jesus said. So if he says that I am God, and you say, well, I think he's just a bloke, how can you then claim that you have that? Because he says, if you don't believe me, you don't have me or him who sent me. So we've got to take him at his word if we're going to stick with Scripture being our foundation. And I think that's what we try and do on this channel. It's not we're argumentative with other people because we want to be right. We've got to say, well, this is what the Scripture says. That's not what you're saying. And if you then say, well, it's because of this, and you go off into a poetic monologue of why you believe that, then it doesn't matter. I don't care. I don't care what you believe. I want to know what the truth is. And if you know what the truth is saying, it's difference between a belief and a knowing. Knowing it doesn't make it easy, Alex. It's not an easy walk, this. People, as you well know, people have argued with me saying, well, if you're a Christian, you should be perfect now. That's ridiculous. Nobody becomes perfect. It's only in God's eyes that He sees Jesus because we've been given to Him. So He looks at us and He sees Jesus has died for us, and we've put our faith in Him. That's where we get the salvation. There's nothing else in it for us. We can't do anything.
I would say in response to that as well, the message of Job complements this position in Isaiah 53, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. That point in Ezekiel 9 where these 6 guys go out, and one of them, in this linen, and he has to put this mark on the foreheads. And it's all those people who grieve about the state of the world. They wrestle, they struggle. At the end of the day, we've got to have a heart that's moving in the right direction, that's sincere, that really is trying to be true to what life is bringing to the table. If there's not sorrow in that, if there's not grief, if there's not mourning, if you've got no compassion, I don't see you've got the heart of God. That, I think, is, like I said earlier, it's the decisive hallmark. Anyone can talk about correct doctrine, but Jesus said, even those people from Matthew 7, who do many mighty works in His name, cast out demons, and prophesy in His name, depart from me, you works of iniquity, I never knew you. So what is it to have the heart of God and be aligned with God in Christ as a disciple? It's to suffer that stuff. Take up your cross daily and follow me. This prosperity gospel stuff, and this is where, this advisor to Trump.
Paula White, she's a prosperity pimp.
Exactly. So you can see that, wouldn't it be nice if, well, I'm not sure if it would be nice if, because I'd rather be a human being, and I would rather suffer and struggle and have to fight for what's real, because there's so much fake in the world now. For me, the rallying cry is to be authentic, to be a naked spirit in front of God, to be humble and say, God, have mercy on me, a sinner, because I'm nothing. Despite my best efforts, despite what my service is and the best offerings that I can give, I am inadequate. God doesn't despise us. He doesn't write us off. But if we develop ideas above our station and we think we're all that, and we have a nice, convenient, neat and tidy faith, it's not how it is. It really isn't how it is. It's not how life is. Life is messy. That's why Jesus was crucified. That's why it took that. And why He went through everything that He went through, so that we could be healed, not just saved. That's what we need to remember. There's a suffering world out there. There's an opportunity. There's a right mission field for people who can get in touch with the compassionate heart of God. And that's what we should be all about, really. Those who are open, who understand. Blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted. The Beatitudes, come back to that. We mentioned it last week. What's your heart condition? How authentic and real are you? Are you really seeking God? Are you just a voyeur who's getting off on having an opinion and saying my position is right because yours is wrong? Is it just a game, or is this the real thing? And we're not playing games. That's a decision people have to come to in their own time and nail the colours to the mast.
Yeah, I agree with that, mate. Well, with that, Alex, we've gone past, coming up for 20 past 10, so we've done just over 2 hours. It's not been a great show in the way of technical stuff. Again, we seem to get these attacks. I've gone off camera again because I'm hosting, thinking that at least I've covered everything my end, and then Alex, who we normally have trouble with, there's been no issues with, and we only have trouble with Taylor's issues when his mum turns his Wi-Fi off.
Yeah.
But Russ was the one under attack tonight, and I think it's every time we do talk about joining these scriptures to what's going on in the world. And you know, we're Sunday now, we're in the first week of August. And I think by the 10th, and by this time next week, I think we're possibly going to have more things to talk about. I mean, we just can't get through enough the earthquakes, the frequency, the consistency of the depth of these earthquakes. Are they man-made? Are they not man-made? Are we seeing prophecy in Scripture being pushed to be fulfilled? You know, we get to the Daniel 9:27, where Daniel 9 talks about the Messiah, all the way up to, for some people, 9:27, where it suddenly changes to the Antichrist making this pact. Well, this pact is going to be made on peace, and we see a pact potentially coming together to be peace and safety. And I think this is now the time where we've got to just keep sowing these seeds, Alex. They're not up to us to grow them. We've just got to keep coming on here every week and watering what we can do. And you know, the few people that watch, maybe they've got eyes and ears that'll hear. That's all we can do, mate. I'd like to thank everybody in the chat room who've had a really good debate on in there tonight. Please, if you haven't already hit like and subscribe or and share, please do, because for all the sharing that I do, I'm quite shadow banned, it would seem. So I'd like, if you can just share it just once a week on whatever groups you're on. If it resonates with you, if it doesn't, it doesn't. It's just, we're here to ask the real questions, and we're here for the real debate. If you want to come on and debate us sometime from your position, bring your reasoning, bring your evidence. That's what we're up for. I don't think there's any problems with that, is there, Alex?
That's what we want to encourage. At the end of the day, we are going to state a position that we believe in, obviously. That can't be avoided. But if people can come with a coherent argument and not just state a position, you know, that we have to engage. We all have to engage each other if we're interested enough to do it. We can just state our position all day. I mean, I started off originally when we started this, I was much more embedded in what was going on culturally. And I've got an eye on it, or half an eye, but I've moved my position. And ultimately, everyone's position should be constantly changing because of nuance and so on. But if you can make a case, it's a big conversation that we need to have. And then we can monitor it, keep our eyes on it. And you become like a community, just an online community. And, you know, as long as we've got that and we've got respect, then we can have these conversations.
That's why we've got to join the dots as we move on and move forward. It's important not to cut the ties, and certainly not be able to drop back a few links to inform people who are stuck on those links, because there's only one way out of all this. There's only one book of all these manuscripts that have come together. There's only one book coming from the Hebrew that says that this is the truth, and all the religions say no, that's not true. So you've got to decide, man who tells a lot of lies, or these divinely inspired manuscripts through man, but are totally against every other narrative. I think it really is time you've got to put some thought into it, for not just you, but for your family. Anyway, see you next week, guys, God willing.
Yeah.
Night, God bless, guys.
All right.